Welcome. This is our weekly social justice research seminar. I'm Mike Hurlburt. I'm an associate professor in the Suzanne Dworak-Peck School of Social Work and our associate dean for faculty affairs. And I first of all want to thank Eric Rice for setting up this community space. This is a community space for important dialogue and discussion. Often we're talking about research, but we have room for research and scholarship, but we have room for other important dialogues, and there are important dialogues that need to be held on a regular basis, including about things that are happening at the federal level. Fortunately, I'm joined by several colleagues who represent different aspects of the teaching faculty, the faculty within our school, including teaching, practicum, and research-oriented faculty. I don't think any of us have seen it. I'm going to just make a couple comments and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves. I don't think we've seen anything like this in our lifetime. So it's things that we need to talk about as faculty, as students, as staff. And this is a critical function for universities to have spaces where we can talk and dialogue. I'm joined by Omar Lopez, Eric Rice, Michal Sela-Amit. Before I ask you to introduce yourselves, I want to just note there are too many things to discuss today. We will not be able to address all of them. This is an ongoing dialogue, but it's our responsibility as citizens to be informed and to discuss these things. I also want to note that some of the things we talk about we want to recognize. It would not be honest to not recognize that some of the things that we are chatting about today, that come from federal policy changes and executive orders, aren't in tension with some fundamental ethical principles. I used to be the chair for an institutional review board that has basic ethical principles that are set down in federal rules. Some of those principles have to relate to things like respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. Unsurprisingly, these are very similar to some of social work's own values of service, dignity and worth of individuals, centrality of relationships, and social justice. So I think as we begin this dialogue, we need open, free spaces for communication, but we also recognize the tension, and some of my questions will relate to these tensions as we navigate really what are uncharted times and changes. So I'm going to stop there and just want to, I guess, maybe one more thing. This is a space for dialogue. We won't be taking political positions. We won't be trying to represent the university. These are our observations, our reflections, our dialogue, and I'm going to encourage a free-flowing exchange. So we'll talk for maybe 25-30 minutes, and then there'll be space for questions as well. So I'm just going to ask each of you to briefly introduce yourselves, and then we'll kind of continue on into some questions, if that's okay. I'll just start right here on my right.
Sure, thank you. Michal Sela-Amit, Associate Teaching Professor, and specializing in children, youth, and family, IPV, GB, and arts in social work. Mainly, my function here is to teach. I'm coming from that perspective to you today.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Omar Lopez. I'm a practical faculty here. I've been here at USC for 15 years. Currently having a administrative appointment as assistant dean of an office of recruitment and workforce development, something that our school started basically looking at all the programs in workforce development events. How do we, as an applied profession, how do we fill the gaps of the workforce? Are we producing MSWs? Basically, they're going to go out and then serve the population because we're still going to serve it according to all code of ethics, which is something that I'm going to be discussing today, right? I'll share as well my background. I'm a former undocumented immigrant, essentially, that drives my identity as a professional, as a social worker, as a member of the community. And makes a big difference in terms of kind of what I do as a faculty person, which I appreciated the point that you brought up, Mike, where at a university, we need to be able to speak our minds. There's going to be conflicts, there's going to be tension, right? We have to figure out where our values stand, where do we stand as a profession, and how do we practically move forward. So that's going to be, I think, a common discussion. Thanks, Omar.
Hi, I'm Eric Rice. I'm a professor in the School of Social Work here. I'm also the Associate Dean for Research and the usual host of this seminar series, but I was eager to myself be a panelist in this discussion because I think I have a lot of interest and thoughts about what's happening currently and how it's impacting research in the university. And I just want to echo what Omar had and Michal had said, which is, you know, a belief in the end, you Mike, thinking that it's really important for us as a university community to come together and dialogue and utilize our freedom of speech and our academic freedom, you know, and to have meaningful dialogues even when times are tough. So, thanks.
And I think I'm going to go ahead and start with Eric because some of the most recent changes have to do with potential funding for federal research. And I think it will ease us in, there's nothing easy about these conversations, but it will start us into something where I think as we move over into the field of teaching and how we approach things in our classrooms, in our wider intellectual spaces, those are more deeper, complicated. They're all complicated.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to start off with the issue of what's happening. Some of this is information sharing, but some of it is what are you seeing? What kinds of conversations do you see that are happening? Because there are conversations happening at multiple levels, at the university level, at the inter-university level. So what are you seeing here?
Yeah. I mean, I guess first by way of information sharing, briefly, you know, there have been as a result of some of the more recent executive orders, especially the one about gender ideology, there has been some movement within the federal research funding organizations, particularly NIH has had this impact where there are funding opportunities that have been discontinued, where there is some signaling that some currently funded under rolling over into this new presidential administration, that some research will be no longer renewed for its funding that was supposed to be for multiple years. I personally have a couple of students who have been impacted by having grants that they were applying for to support their dissertation research taken down. So those opportunities were removed. Last week on Friday afternoon, we had this announcement that there was going to be a change in the indirect cost recovery. And then by yesterday, we had a news that there has been a court injunction to pause that, to have that evaluated. But you know, this would be a major impact on the research funding at institutions around the country, right? Not just at USC, but all over the country. And you know, reductions in indirect costs from more to down to 15%, at least at USC, would result in probably about a 30% reduction overall in the amount of funding that we receive as a university. So from the government, from NIH. So it's a significant issue what's being discussed here. There are discussions that I've been having with faculty who are impacted by these decisions, trying to think about what to do moving forward. And also there have been some discussions amongst associate deans for research across different schools, where we have been talking with one another about what's happening and how are we going to address these things, and how are we going to think about continuing to conduct research as the terrain changes.
And are there where are these ongoing dialogues?
Yeah, these are ongoing. I mean, I think maybe the important thing to point out is that there's so much uncertainty and things are changing on a daily basis that it is hard to know and to create new policies. So some folks may feel that there's a lack of schools or the university coming up with new policies, but it's impossible to come up with new policies until we actually know what the policies from the federal government are or are not going to be that we're going to have to react to. And these are policies that are being challenged and are subject to change still. So, but these are ongoing dialogues that are happening And I'm trying to communicate with people directly who are impacted so that, people know that there are these dialogues going on. In fact, that's part of, the inspiration for having this forum today was just so that we can talk about the fact that we are talking about, leadership around the university is talking about what's happening. We just need to there's a lot of uncertainty to deal with.
Okay, so I think we'll cycle. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Mark.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback
Yeah,
on that, because,
please.
I think that's, from my end, it's a little bit of not the research grants, but it's also training grants,
Right.
right, that are
Mhm.
impacted. And our school, for the last decade, we brought in about $50 million, with half of it going to the students. So access to higher education is a big topic here.
And
right?
where are these grants? These are federal grants?
Federal grants primarily, there's some that are state level and some that are local, but piggybacking on what Eric was saying, it's like in an everyday basis, we kind of have to wait to see how things are trickling down from the current administration. And I think in leadership roles, we need to figure out like how to react, but not be to be passive, right? We have to project, we have to think ahead how things are gonna impact us, right? But also not to overreact, right? About like things that are happening, like Eric pointed out. There are things that are being trickling down, but then judges are getting, doing their job, right?
Mhm.
And blocking things, right? So, right now we're working on a proposal that is, specifically directed at recruiting students from disadvantaged backgrounds. It has diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? The practicality of it is a little challenging because, as I shared with students when I teach, I always have like an ethical compass, right? And I know where my threshold is at, but that ethical compass, the needle moves forward all the time, back and forward. And now we're adjusting language close to the threshold that talks about diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, but it's a little mask, right? We're talking about students from disadvantaged backgrounds, and it feels a little icky because you're not fully writing what you believe in, right? But you were thinking about the audience that is gonna find 3.25 million, that is not gonna change how we're gonna operationalize it, right? But it's that game, that dance that you're doing, essentially. So tumultuous times, challenging. I don't know that we have a crystal ball. I wish I had a crystal ball to know what the right solution is gonna be, but that conversations need to continue to happen, which is why we're having this dialogue.
Yeah, I want to take it from here and to talk about the reality that we're all facing. And I really want to start with ourselves, because I think I saw it in what happened to me, what happened to my colleagues, and what's happening to our students. And that is, we are bombarded. We are bombarded every single day in multiple directions, in things that we thought that they are the basis of our reality, and all of a sudden they're not. So what happens in this situation? We're angry, we're in grief, we are in loss, we're confused, we don't know where things are coming from. And this is not only us, this is our students that come to class or don't come to class. It's our colleagues that are impacted. All of that is happening at the same time. And so the first thing I think that we need to do is to acknowledge the impact that it has on us as social workers, as people that educate people, as researchers, people who really care about those vulnerable populations that we talk about. And the fact that so many populations are impacted of our students. You cannot slice it one way or another. It is everywhere. It is, LGBTQ. It is those in communities of immigrants. It is those who are worried about children in vulnerable families and issues related to things that we learn to see as basics, such as Head Start program or other programs. It's all up in the air, and it's all impacting the way by which we are dealing with it. And my thoughts are that we really need to think about regulating our emotions, understand that this is a long haul, and to really come from a perspective of self-care, community care, because without it, we cannot function and be effective in our response to what's happening. So this is where I'm coming from. How do we take care of ourselves and each others? Because it's our colleagues. I've had a meeting with my colleagues in the teaching line and senior lecture lines on Friday. And I've heard how so many of us are impacted personally and with our students and what kind of challenges we're facing that we didn't face before. So this is where I think we need to start. Professional self-care, students, and advocate for students about their self-care and how they can self-regulate and move forward, because this is professionalism. And we are about teaching them what does it mean to be a professional in times of like this.
So, what I'd like to do, I find myself needing to personally manage my roles within the university. My roles as an individual, as a citizen in the country, and understand those different roles. What I would like to do is just, Eric, you're the associate dean for research, and I think to your point, Michal, this is going to be these things are going to be unfolding over an extended period, clearly over an extended period of time. We're only beginning to see some of the impacts and begin to think about how can we approach them? What, to your point, Omar, what are ways that we approach them that feel true to our values and ethics? And so what I guess I'm going to ask each of you and Eric, you and I talked about this a little bit before the panel, right? You have some grants that are ongoing. I know you're working with others whose research is also being impacted.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is get down into a little bit more specifics
Sure.
of examples of things that you're seeing and how you are initially thinking about adapting or responding in your professional role within the university setting. And we each have different kinds of roles, research and workforce development and teaching. So I'd like to kind of.
Yeah, I think thinking about how have I reacted in my role as the associate dean for research and also as a professor of I have a specific case where a student of mine was applying for a diversity supplement grant that was to go to be a part of an ongoing project that was funded by the CDC, and this student put forth all this effort to get their grant proposal together, and the day before it was due, this funding opportunity was removed. It was a little bit later than some of the funding opportunities had been removed from the NIH because this was from the CDC. And the student is rightly devastated. They feel that I've put forth this effort and this energy to try to get an opportunity that they were told that they were eligible for. And one of the things that I've tried to say to this student and to another student who has similarly had a research that, and part of it is that not only is it a diversity supplement, but the research itself was focused on issues that impact the LGBTQ community, who are young people experiencing homelessness who are part of the LGBTQ community, and focusing in another grant that was focused on transgender and non-cisgender and other and minority young people within that context, which is a group of young people that I've done research on for 25 years at this point, and have a lot of personal commitment to doing that kind of research. And what I've said to these students is, we still have freedom of speech and and academic freedom. And even if our grants are not going to be funded, yes, this is devastating. And this is a blow to the science that we believe in and that we think ought to be, from our perspective, funded. But that doesn't mean that we cannot continue to try to do this kind of research. But it's going to be much harder to do this kind of research. I mean, the reality is that conducting research at the highest level requires resources. And so, when those resources are removed, it's more of a challenge. But I don't want people to, who I'm working with, to abandon the communities that they feel connected to and that they want to support and that they want to conduct scientific research to demonstrate health inequities around, that are, scientifically verifiable facts that one can see, and document in the world, and that this is work that still should be done. And thinking moving forward, how are we going to deal with those things, and having conversations with them about how will we find other ways to pursue conducting this research if the federal government is not going to support that. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard.
That piggybacking on that, back to training grants, it's how do we operationalize training grants that are intended to recruit people like me, right? I benefited from and changed my life under workforce development stipend, being a member of the community that social work serves, right? So we're doing that in having to figure out how to operationalize grants that recruit students from diverse backgrounds so that they could be culturally prepared to work linguistically, culturally, with the vulnerable population, public child welfare, public health, geriatrics. It's going to be challenging, right? So it's challenging to think about how do we operationalize. One of my other roles that I have here at the university.
Omar, can I ask you one
Yes,
question
yes.
about that? Are there already federal changes that are impacting those things, or are you anticipating?
I'm anticipating.
You're
that.
anticipating.
There's
those.
not in effect just yet. In fact, this proposal that I mentioned earlier is due in a couple of weeks, right? And we're kind of putting it together and massaging it. The sponsor has indicated that nothing has changed. But their answer has been not a fully, nothing has changed. The way I read into it, that things haven't trickled down to actually impact the changes that might be coming down, right? So we're preparing by not panicking. We're still putting together the proposal, but massaging it, right?
No, that's exactly what we did too. I mean,
Yeah.
because we had similar guidance. I mean, a program officer said, it has not yet been pulled. Continue on, and then it was, and then it was.
So that's might be something that might happen to this proposal, and it hasn't made itself way
Okay.
there. But knowing how things occur during the first Trump administration, I'm guiding my team in that direction, using some of the things that we saw during his first administration to kind of reinforce that message, behavioral health, like gun loss is not the problem, is the perpetrator, right? So reframing essentially how we present an issue, right? In terms of how the audience that responding those words. So that's one thing. The other component that I was going to say, I mentioned as well, is that, I think a strategy is that we have to figure out how to build bridges, and what I mean by that is that another role that I had here at the university, I'm the head coach for the boxing team. We went to compete at a military academy. I won't say which one, but many of them voted for Trump. And all they were talking about is about the challenges in operationalizing the things that were coming down from the administration. Right? So these are people that voted for him, but just didn't realize the challenges that were going to be coming down the pipe. So I think we need to figure out how to build those bridges, with people from the other perspective, for lack of a better word, so that we could kind of meet objectives that are realistic in our society.
Yeah, I very much agree. And just before that, I want to share a little bit about how it seems from the classroom perspective in terms of our students and what kind of impacts our students are having. And so just like we do, a lot of them are in an anger state, in a grief state, in a mobilization state. Let's do it. Let's advocate. How can we advocate? Why are we not doing that already? Well, a lot of them are really worried and don't feel comfortable. I have students that felt like they can come here, ask why USC is not actually holding, on Zoom because they're afraid from ICE going around here. I have students that felt that they can't email me through the university because they're not sure whether it is all, part of like Elon Musk things and they're gonna be impacted. And so they felt more comfortable for whatever reason to text me or, not answer me at all and then come the next week somehow and explain what's going on. So we have students that some of their family members have already been deported. They're in our classes. Okay? We have LGBTQ students in our classes, transgender, gender fluid that are in our classes. And we cannot not see the impact that is having on them and not attend to them. Office hours went up across the board. Any, faculty member that I talk to say office hours are up. We need to use a lot of calming. We do talk about it. I'm always telling myself and telling others, the Center for Excellence in Teaching is right here and on the website. You can always look what kind of suggestions they have for handling challenging conversations. It is very enlightening and helpful. How to utilize it, how to set it, how to be there. It is not a place for me, I feel, to start lecturing my values. It is an opportunity, as I see it, to bring the students to a point where they think critically about situation, even if they voted for Trump. Maybe they have not anticipated at all what's going to happen, but think critically, what does it mean to have service? What does it mean, social justice? How does it look with what's going on at the point? We need to be very thoughtful. How is that all related to what we're teaching at the moment today? What kind of discussions can we have today that are useful for our students to build their professional identity in understanding of the topic from a variety of directions, not one way, not preaching. That's what I'm thinking that is going to be very useful for building the next generations.
And how has this started to, obviously, we're only, what was inauguration day was January 21st. It feels like a year ago at this point. I'm assuming you are needing to begin to adapt the ways that you're approaching things in the classroom.
Yeah,
And are these the kinds of things how have things changed?
I have to tell you from my perspective, coming to a class, if I taught this class before, so I have something from before that is kind of helping prepare it. I need to toss it a little bit in the side and say, okay, how is this topic relevant to what's happening today? It needs to be alive, related to what's happening now, because otherwise students are not going to be at all interested in being in the class. We are not in the ivory tower. We're social workers. We are coming from the people. Our students are the people impacted. We got to make sure that it is relevant. So this is what's happening. It takes way more time to prepare. It takes way more time to attend to students wherever they're at, and to rethink how do we weave in critical thinking, our, values and ethics, and multiple perspectives. Because I think that if we're coming and just talking about one way of looking at things and not seeing what opportunities are there in this kind of chaos that is happening, what opportunities are there for us? Because there are opportunities, getting better, getting limber, getting more impactful in ways, and even in terms of shaping identities. What are opportunities of shaping an identity of social worker, ourselves and our students?
So I contemplated asking the question, are there any things that we are learning yet, right, that could actually be advantageous or helpful? But I'm gonna hold on. I think on that kind of question, I think we can all universally say that we need to continue to keep our values in our classroom environments and in our workforce training and in our research. Are we all in?
Oh, yeah, one I mean, one can't legislate away values.
Right.
Right, I mean, these, and we still have the freedom of expression and freedom of speech in this country, and we should be proud to have values, and as a profession, we have values, and I think as individuals, we have values, and certainly, social work has such a strong and strident commitment to social justice and a commitment to serving disadvantaged groups, to raising up voices of people who have historically been silenced and disadvantaged. I mean, there's a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to self-determination of things like gender and race. And this is important. And I think that, at least for myself, I want to continue to uphold those values in the work that I do, in the teaching that I do, the writing that I do, and to encourage others to continue to do that as well, federal dollars or not, to support that work or not.
So I'm watching our time. Yeah, we have about 15 minutes left. It seems like a good time to maybe see what kind of questions there are here in the audience in person. And also, Eric, do you have access to?
I do have access to the one question that we have. So what I would like to encourage folks who are online to use the question and answer function, as that is what I have left available. So you can just post a question, and it looks like we have one person who has posted a question, and then I see another person who has raised their hand. So
why don't we start online?
Okay.
And then we'll come back to.
So the first person to raise a question was, this is from Maya Hotchkiss. Any ideas about what we as social justice advocates can do to play offense a bit and generate good trouble, rather than just waiting until we figure out our defense adaptation to the new norm?
One answer that I think comes to mind is that I think holding spaces where we are coming together to exchange these ideas is important, right? We are still dealing with like post-pandemic society realities that organically coming together is harder. But so we have to be more intentional about like doing what we do right now, right? Organically, at a team meeting that I just had right before this, our team agreed to have like a standing item. Let's continue to have a conversation about the impact of the political climate on our operations. So holding that space, right, and making it, in our case, a formal agenda item. So I think that that's what we need to do proactively. Just figure out a way how to like organize ourselves to hold spaces like this.
I think that this is a great place to start, and I think also that we need to be watchful of what's happening. And I think the administration now is a little bit taking it, maybe they're a little bit surprised by what's already is happening, in terms of the courts. I do believe that we need to go in communities. So that means that we need to figure out which are the core issues that we care about the most as individuals, and how do we plan on moving forward in terms of working together as a group with other people who are like-minded. Otherwise, I think it might be easy to fall into helplessness. And so that's the one thing we don't want to have, right? So I had a student that said, I'm sorry, I didn't come to class because I went to demonstrate with my community. And I said, you did social work. Is social work. So, that's what I'm thinking that we can do. That is part of the pushback. I don't know how we can. One of the things that I might think too is that this is an opportunity to break silos between, the different groups. And we are knowledgeable how to carry conversations, and we can utilize our knowledge and skills to encourage breaking those kind of silos.
I love that, both of you have mentioned at different points in time, sort of reaching across the aisle sort of ideas that, this is, there are people who I think the political dialogue in our country has become so divisive in the last decade or two. And I remember a time when I was much younger when having disagreements about politics was a more civil thing that happened. And I think we need to try to have those sorts of engagements with people who disagree with us again, because I think that there may be more agreement about, some of these issues with people who we think disagree with us, and we need to build alliances, and we need to. Yeah, so I think that's to me something important. There's 4 other questions on the online, and I know you want to probably open to other people here as well. So
Can I just also say, I think we need to just also be mindful of, we have different roles that we play within the university, but also as individuals, right? To Maya's question about going on offense, we each individually can make decisions about where we engage in protest and advocacy and calling senators and legislators and attorneys general, et cetera. So part of the reason for having these kinds of spaces is so we are all more empowered to know where and what opportunities there are to take individual actions, even if the university as a institution isn't specifically going to take particular actions. So let's go to a question in that's here in person, and then come back to online. Go ahead.
So I think values-based conversations are so important, and I hear how each of you in your roles are working towards fostering an environment where students feel supported. And as Professor Amit said, that social work is about advocacy and organizing. And what are ways that you as faculty in your roles can be a part of that change or support students in doing more organizing work to kind of change, to start at values, but then go into action and be able to carry that through in our local communities or in the issues that are impacting students right now?
The one thing that comes to mind, and I don't have a formulated answer, but I mentioned a little bit about my boxing ball, here with the students. And organically, the students not only are training to compete and represent USC with other universities, but they're taking it up themselves to use their privilege to go out into the communities, right? So we are working with El Centro del Pueblo, former place where Professor Maxwell used to work. They have like a gang prevention programming, right? Through boxing. So, and the concept is that these students that attend that group are training to be collegiate boxers, right? The key there is that they're going to college, right? The boxing, but a lot of it is like what it takes, the great discipline, the structure to actually box, to actually go from their communities of this Spanish background to make it to a place like USC, right? So the students that have gone with me, they're boxers, and they do this on top of everything else that they do. They're undergraduate students, One in particular that comes to mind reminds me of myself. And what I mean by that, he is here undocumented. Figure out a way how to pay for tuition, right? And he's a little aloof about like things that are going on, right? And I remember when you're that age, you feel like you're invincible. But the reality is that you have to take precautions, right, to reflect the realities of the world. So in my case, I would recommend that as faculty, we touch bases with bright students like all of you and encourage you to be involved in your communities, right? By bringing your values to the forefront and doing something about it, right? Like in this case, he feels like he owes it to these kids to be there, holding mitts, working out with them, sorting out with them, crying with them, helping them do the application for college. It's powerful.
Yeah, I think that this is not a time for, and this is my own opinion, for faculty to march at the front. This is the time to march together with students, to work together with students, to talk together with students. It's about togetherness, and it's about allowing opportunities for becoming leaders, and that is so critical.
Can I just make one
Yeah,
quick comment?
yeah,
I mean,
go for it.
I agree with the things that have been said, and I think part of our role is to train people about how to be active, how to work with communities. I think this happens with
Yeah.
our research activities. I think, you know, any, I think of ethics and values as hard won, right? These are things that we often take for granted, but they're hard won. Actually, they take a long time. If you think back to the Belmont report for human subjects research, it's took decades. And many of our social movements are things that are decades long. For example, you probably remember, we had a Me Too movement, right? Still hopefully in progress, and some of our students in our doctoral program were quite active. But from my perspective, the most important thing we could do was to support them, to provide feedback, support, not necessarily be at the front, because often in this case, the ones most impacted were the ones who were the strongest voices. So it's about being supportive. And as faculty, I think we can do that. We can provide training, we can provide support. We're not doing this as an institutional representative saying this is what our school specifically is doing, but we are doing this as faculty members who have freedom of speech and training within the values of the social work profession. Eric, I think you had some other questions on.
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's so the another question is, I see Melissa Nolan has raised their hand, so I'm gonna press allow to talk. Melissa, if you want to ask your question, go ahead.
I'm not sure if it's necessary. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. So I really just wanted to highlight a few things that I think it's amazing that you all are having this discussion, because there's so many people that are afraid and just like all the unknowns. So I hope we continue this just kind of throughout this process. And also, I really loved when we talked about like building bridges, especially for those folks that we might not align with, because we're seeing a lot of repercussions, right? From, let's say, a certain group voting a certain way, they didn't expect all this. So I thought that was really cool to hear that we should be building bridges and maybe try to get more connected with those other folks that we might not align with. Because the more people we have, the stronger we're going to be. And what I've been thinking a lot about in these past few weeks have been the privilege that, like, for instance, I can speak for myself that I have. Just even like speaking up and willing to go to a protest and willing to not be afraid is so much privilege that I sometimes forget. So I'm glad that I'm able to reflect on that. And I really hope to continue to come to these kinds of meetings. Thank you. That was it.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you. Another question is, this is from Francis Spivey. First, I'd like to thank you each for your vulnerability and transparency in normalizing the stress that we are all feeling. I'm an MSW student currently and had planned to address the appropriate US Senate committee topic this semester, but I'm feeling silenced just by the change in policies before I even finalize my presentation. What encouragement would you provide to shift advocacy approaches away from policy change to a more community-based advocacy? So I guess this is a question of, wanting support and also advice about how to proceed in the program. So I mean, I'll defer to the people who are actively teaching the MSW program this semester, which I love teaching in the MSW program. I'm not teaching in this particular semester.
Yeah, I think all our students need the support, and any one of them, nursing, DSW, PhD, MSW, BSW, they all need support. Our identity is threatened by what's happening, our perspective of what's real and what can be happening in our lifetime changed, obviously. And I think my words is don't hesitate to approach whoever you think that could have a listening ear. And I don't know anyone that isn't in our midst. So reach out, because it's impossible to hold classes only about those issues, but Our office hours are always flexible and open, and in class, feel free to reach out and build and do whatever you feel that is, that you have the urge to do in terms of, any kind of advocacy, community planning, community, anything that you feel that would reflect well and assist you to build your identity and feel comfortable going to sleep that night, feeling that you weren't silenced. No one is going to silence you. This is our privilege. So use it.
So Eric, I think we're here at 12:45.
Just about at 12:45, which is our time, yeah.
So first of all, I want to say thank you to everyone who's here in person. Thanks to the folks who are online. I think
An army online.
yeah, part of
almost
our,
80 people.
as I said, we cannot touch on all of the things that are happening. Probably one of the most important things we want to do is normalize having conversations about what's happening in the world around us, and recognizing that like, once again, the essential values of the social work discipline, and because it does, right? It calls us to take actions in our personal capacities, and we continue to try to provide education that's surrounded by those values. Even as there's that tension and challenge, I would call it in some cases, right, way beyond a tension, right? It's like a screaming in my ears sometimes, like how do these things fit together? We need to be able to talk about those things, even though we're very early in what is somewhat of there was just a national discussion about this, and I think they called it a flooding the zone, right? kind of the moment in terms of putting all these things out there to create chaos. So
I just want to say one thing, and it is, we have mechanisms of support for students that
Yes,
everybody
thank you.
needs to know. So we have the We Care, we have advisors, we have cells, we have mental health support. So don't be afraid to reach out.
The student mental health services are available to all of our students, and I also just want to acknowledge, thank you for taking the time, all of you, for being a part of this discussion, but also just acknowledging the amount of hurt and anger that was also being expressed in some of the questions that got to be. I appreciate some of the questions and comments that we're valuing, that we are holding this space, but I also want to just acknowledge that I how much pain I see that people are in this time, and want to let people know that is being seen and heard.
thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you for that.